President Biden traveled to swing state Pennsylvania over the weekend as the 2024 races are gearing up. For analysis, we turn now to our Politics Monday team. That is Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter and Tamara Keith of NPR. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here. So the 2024 race is certainly heating up on both the Republican and the Democratic side. I just want to play a little bit of what we've seen from President Biden this weekend. Here he is delivering his message to voters in Pennsylvania over the weekend.
Under my predecessor, Infrastructure Week became a punchline. On my watch, we're making infrastructure a decade headline.
So, Tam, you got the first broadcast interview with Mr. Biden's campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, since she took on that role. What did you learn about their re-election strategy at this point in the campaign?
They are working hand in hand with the Democratic National Committee in a way that past Democratic campaigns and even the Obama campaign certainly did not. And that goes all the way down to literally, I interviewed Julie Chavez Rodriguez in her office that was sparsely decorated in DNC headquarters. The way it was described to me is that the DNC is the chassis, and then the Biden campaign will come on top of it as the race car going around the track. But right now, they feel pretty confident in the way that this chassis is built, in part because they didn't go through the typical boom and bust cycle that the party has gone through in the past. They have invested really heavily in the party infrastructure. And what does that look like? What does that mean? That means that they sent money and resources and were making calls, had Democratic volunteers from all over the country making calls into Wisconsin for that state Supreme Court race. And the Democratic Party supported candidate won in that race, but also they were able to test out the strategies that they'll be using in the presidential campaign and in Senate races and in House races and races up and down the ballot, testing out strategies for reaching voters and actually reaching them and getting them to go out and vote.
So, Amy, let's talk about some of those voters they need to reach. You had a really interesting look at one segment in particular, which is Latino voters, the fastest growing electorate in America. How is the Biden coalition doing there?
Well, this survey of Latino voters looking at how they voted in 2022 in battleground states, and then who didn't vote in 2022, and what do we think we know about those voters? And that, to me, was the most interesting finding of this survey, is those voters who showed up and voted in 2020, again, Latino voters in battleground states, but didn't vote in either midterm, they lean a little bit more Republican than they do Democrat. And on the issue of the economy, and this is what was really interesting, I thought, about the president's speech this weekend in Philadelphia, focusing a lot on the economy. These voters, they give, on the issue of inflation, Republicans a 13-point advantage. Wow. But when you ask the question of who do you think looks out for the wealthy, who do you think looks out for working people, Democrats have a huge advantage on that question of looking out for regular people or working people. And I think that's what you're going to see the Biden campaign do with these swing voters. It's why in his speech he didn't talk about Donald Trump, he didn't talk about democracy, he didn't talk about abortion, he talked about jobs and the economy, jobs and the economy. When inflation is still as high as it is, I don't think the Biden campaign is going to be able to convince people that they shouldn't worry about inflation. It's going to be a top issue. But what you do when the economy is not doing well and people don't think you're doing a particularly good job as the president, you make the issue of the economy about more than just the economy. Who's looking out for you and your family? And even if you're feeling a little bit stretched by the economy versus this party or this candidate who's not looking out for you.
I want to take a look at the latest Democratic polling as well, because of course Mr. Biden is the incumbent, but he's not the only candidate. And I want to get your take on this because obviously Marianne Williamson has also declared her candidacy, and also Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You see right there polling at 17%, still far behind Mr. Biden's 70%. But this is someone, Tam, who has been pushing conspiracy theories when it comes to vaccine efficacy, on election fraud as well. What does it say to you that he's actually polling in double digits right now among Democrats?
What it says is something that we've been talking about in this segment for a very long time, which is that there is a share of the Democratic Party who maybe likes Joe Biden, but doesn't want him to run again. And is very clear that they do not want him to run again. And so you throw a couple names out there. Kennedy's a name people recognize. They say, okay, Kennedy. it's not necessarily that his campaign is taking off in any way. It's more of a place for people to go who are concerned about President Biden's age, who didn't think he was going to run again, who don't want him to run again. And what I will say, though, is as we talked earlier about the Democratic Party and that whole party infrastructure, that is set up to make sure that President Biden does not have a legitimate or real or anything to worry about primary challenge, because there are not going to be debates.
Yeah, but there is, I would be wary of feeling as confident if I were the DNC or the Biden campaign, only in that your point is there's an incredible amount of ambivalence. It's in the polling that we have here at the NewsHour. We see a significant portion of the Democratic electorate saying, I wish there was somebody else. And so what I'm sort of surprised by is the fact that outside groups, again, I don't think the Biden campaign will do this, but groups supporting Biden haven't gone out and tried to make a contrast with RFK Jr. in talking about some of the things you talked about, Amna, about his positions on vaccines, but also the fact that he's being supported, or at least he's showing up on podcasts of conservatives that I think many Democrats would find not to their liking.
Meanwhile, on the Republican side, we have a current field of declared major candidates of 10 people so far. At this point, they are chasing the current frontrunner, former President Donald Trump, who's solidified his support despite facing federal charges. And that's leading to a lot of uncomfortable and persistent questions of all the other candidates, like this exchange with former Vice President Mike Pence over the weekend.
If you were President Biden, would you pardon him right now?
I just think this whole matter is incredibly divisive for the country. Look, I just think at the end of the day, it is saddening to me that we are now in this moment.
Tam, we know this trial is not likely to wrap up before the election. Can the candidates actually steer conversations back to policies and their priorities?
Well, some of them don't want to. Some of them want to be out there defending Trump, but then saying, however, do you really want this drama? I think that they are all still trying to figure out a way to run against him without actually running against him, because his voters are quite loyal. His voters feel that he's been mistreated. So it's almost like they want to be able to go out and say, Trump derangement syndrome is real, but do you really want to have to deal with that for 4 more years?
Amy,
Well, and I think that's what they're trying to figure out. The difference to me in talking to Republican strategists this time around versus 2016, 2016, there was so much confidence. Oh, don't worry, we've got Trump. We figured this out. Now, they're basically saying, we don't know what's going to work. But I think essentially the message will come down to this from Republicans who'd like to beat Donald Trump. It's not so much that he can't win the election. It's that if he wins the election against Joe Biden, he won't be able to get much done because of all of these reasons. The deep state's going to come after him. The media is going to continue to go after him. The Justice Department, it'll be his Justice Department, whatever. There will be other issues that will make it impossible for him to win. But I think fundamentally the reason so many of these candidates aren't breaking through is that they haven't given a reason yet to voters who may be curious. They're not making a compelling case for why they should be the one to be the nominee. That's the challenge going forward for them.
Still plenty of time. It's very early. We can't say this enough. Amy Walter, Tamara Keith, thank you so much. Good to see you both.
Good to see you.